With me I have Dr. David Gehring from the Department of History here in Nottingham, and I'm a historian in a theology department, and David is a historian in a history department but working on religion. And I thought it would be interesting for us to have a discussion about the connection between religion and history.
Where do we start?
Okay,
If we're thinking about the Reformation, right? If we're thinking about
let's use the Reformation as our case study.
I like it. Good. If we're thinking about the Reformation of the 16th century, or even more properly, the Reformations in the plural of the 16th century, religion cannot be separated from politics, religion, broader society, cultural developments, and so any historian of the period of the 16th century or of the 17th century needs to be not only mindful of the place of religion in broader social and political developments, but also oftentimes give religion pride of place, not just be mindful. And so in my own work, I'm very much a historian of ideas, of politics, of international relations and diplomacy. But I'm really interested in how religion in the Reformation can be seen as very much a driving or even motivating force for people in their everyday lives, for governments in their domestic policies and foreign policies. And so religion and history really for me go hand in glove for the 16th century.
And we tend to treat religion as if it's almost a peripheral accidental interest. And that means that when we look back to the past, and we look back to the 16th century, we find it very hard to realize that here is a society for whom theological argument is as crucial matter of life and death as the debates I remember in my youth between the communist and the capitalist systems.
It's the bread and butter of the day. It is what's on the mind constantly, right? It was said, interestingly, one of the first great historians of the Reformation was writing his commentaries on the affairs during the reign of Charles V. This is Johann Sleiden, publishing the first great history of the Reformation. And towards the end of it, he points out that religion and politics cannot be separated, and nor should they be separated. You need to understand the two together. And so I think it's a nice reminder for us in the 21st century, studying the Reformation, studying the 16th century in any aspect, really. It's a reminder that we need to be thinking about religion alongside politics, and we need to be thinking about how they really do need to be understood together.
The other fascinating thing is that I remember watching with horror in 2001 the attack on the Twin Towers. Yeah. And I remember a commentator saying something like, "What can drive people to do this?" And I remember thinking, if you actually had read our history, this isn't something being done by people who are very different to us. No. It's being done by people who are very similar to us, except we don't think in that way anymore.
It was immediately recognizable to those who have an appreciation of religious history. I remember that morning as if it were yesterday. That moment for me was very much like the assassination of JFK for a previous generation in my country. But for me, there wasn't so much a sense of confusion. Why would somebody do that? It became fairly clear and fairly obvious what was going on. And I think that it made that particular moment in the American consciousness, made the importance of religious history that much clearer.
That then raises an interesting question for us as historians. You know the old joke, the past is a foreign country.
Yep.
They do things differently there.
Yep.
Right, okay. How do you, when you're talking to people in our society, actually think your way back into this very different world where religion has a far more central and far more dangerous position?
It's a great question, but I would probably start by taking issue with the notion that it's so very different.
Okay.
Because the Reformation world is, yes, it may be a foreign country. The past is a foreign country. But it's a foreign country I tend to visit frequently. And so it's familiar to me in certain ways. And I think it's actually familiar. The 16th century is actually far more familiar to the 21st than people recognize.
Okay.
They just might not be attuned to it. And so that's why I think an understanding of history of the past is important, but also most certainly the religious past and religious history.
Well, one of the things I was trying to kind of tease you towards is that my own feeling is that we think of the historian as someone who works with documents, the archivist, the recorder, and the digger-outer of dates and so forth. But also, to be a historian is actually, you actually have to have creative sympathy. You actually have, there's a jump of the imagination to try and get inside this other society. And I think, certainly when I'm talking to undergraduates, they think that history is just collecting facts. And they forget that being a historian, it's actually a way of being creative. You said you visited this place.
Yeah.
But it's very much like the activity of going on a holiday. You actually have to get into it.
You need to get into it, and you need to try to make sense of it. And when you try to make sense of it from the documents, right, from the books, from the various accounts we have, we try to make sense of it not only in our own printed works, the books that we write, right, as historians, the journal articles we publish, but also in the classroom, like you say, with your undergraduates. And that's when we can try to use our creativity, use our imagination sometimes to bring the past to life in all of its color, in all of its glory, but also all of its warts.
Yeah,
because sometimes the past isn't particularly nice.
David, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.